Greetings, comrades. Hope this finds you well. Quick shout out to INN, the Indian News Network, which I'm stoked to be a part of, and apparently Christiane for whatever reason. So
I'm perfect.
She has her moments.
Hey, that's rude.
So this is an interesting article at Mint Press. I'll link it down below about this Israeli politician. He's a member of Israel's Knesset, so basically the equivalent of like the House of Representatives or the U.S. Congress here, and he is a anti-Zionist. He's a member of what became the successor of the Israeli Communist Party, and to me, it just really shows, what can happen if these politicians who are elected on a national level, like this person Ofer Cassif is in Israel's Knesset, like they're able to really speak truth to power. They're not beholden to, capital. They're not beholden to, in this case, Zionism, as opposed to, Democratic and Republican politicians who are just completely bought and paid for by corporate interests here in the United States. And as a result, they do the bidding of capital and imperialism and white supremacy, right? So here we go. The struggles of Ofer Cassif, an anti-Zionist in Israel's Knesset. That's like their equivalent of the Congress. This past July, I met with Israeli Knesset member Ofer Cassif at his office in the Knesset. The full interview with him can be viewed on my Patreon page. Cassif is arguably the most progressive Israeli politician in the Knesset and has a history of being on the front line of whatever progressive cause has needed him. Among the first Israelis to refuse to serve in the West Bank, he also been a champion of Palestinian rights throughout his life. Attempts to disqualify him. When Cassif was elected, there was an outcry in the Israeli political right and a serious attempt to disqualify him from being a member of the Knesset. Cassif is a member of the Hadash party, which is a successor to the Israeli Communist Party. Today, Hadash is part of the Joint List. It's almost a ritual, Cassif says, noting that during every election, members of the Israeli right appeal to election committee in the Knesset, which determines who qualifies and who does not, in order to disqualify political parties or individuals from running because they support justice for Palestinians. Very much similar how the Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. try to make it very, very difficult for third parties to get on the ballot or the debate stage, right? The fact that I'm a Jew myself drove them crazy, Cassif admits, and he explains that the right in general, and the Israeli right in particular, has a superficial, linear, and one-dimensional perspective of the world. In other words, if you're an Israeli Jew, you must support Israel and the crimes it commits. There he is on the left with the author of the article, big in the glasses. During the 84 Knesset elections, my father ran on a joint Arab-Jewish list called the Progressive Party for Peace. The right demanded lists be qualified because many of its members are progressive Palestinians, whom the Israeli right wanted to silence. The party's platform called for a two-state solution and full equality for the Palestinian citizens of Israel. The horror of that, right? An anti-Zionist in the Knesset. I asked MK Cassif about a claim he made that Zionism contributes to the rise of anti-Semitism in the world. This was an article I published in Catalan, he said, and the title was Why Am I an Anti-Zionist Jew? The article Cassif wrote explained that Zionism is a racist colonialist movement, which is why he opposes it. Furthermore, he added, Zionism sometimes explicitly and sometimes implicitly supports anti-Semitism. This is not a conspiracy notion and not a claim that is even done consciously, but is inherent to Zionism. Cassif is intellectually unparalleled in Israeli politics. He quotes the words of Gramsci, Foucault, Karl Marx. His office walls are covered with tributes to the greatest socialist, to all the great socialists and to the Palestinian struggle. Cassif got his PhD at the London School of Economics and his postdoc at Columbia U. He then turned to London and taught at LSE, London School of Economics, for 2 years. I was curious as to what a progressive socialist anti-Zionist is doing in the Israeli parliament. There's the OGs themselves, obviously Marx on the left, Lenin on the right. So this is a very interesting perspective, and this is very, in touch with what Lenin said, as we said, as he says under here. This is one of the arenas in which we need to conduct the struggle. He says we need to be in the arena where decisions are made. And he emphasizes not only or even the most important arena, because it's probably not, but is one where we must have a presence. Furthermore, Cassif notes that the state of Israel, or being a Zionist entity today, could change it to something else. I don't say by what name it will be, hinting at the possibility of the state being transformed into free and democratic Palestine. Either way, the institutions of the state will need to function, and we who struggle against injustice need there to be fight the injustices. If we cede the Knesset, we'll lose ground, he says. So, kind of saying that, yes, electoral politics are important. It's important to have a presence there. Otherwise, we cede ground to these, Zionists, these right-wing reactionary figures, right? I will talk as a communist now, in a quote from Lenin. He says to me, quoting from Lenin's work, What is to be done? I have that book somewhere around here, actually, which was written at the end of 1901 and early 1902. Lenin explained at length why and under what circumstances communists should participate in parliaments, trade unions, etc., even if they are reactionary. And the bottom line of what he said is that communists should be present in these arenas and access them in order to change them into more progressive. I will quote from Lenin again and say that the difference between us communists and the bourgeoisie politicians is that for them, the elections are the goal, which is very much the goal of Democrats and Republicans, right? Whereas for communists, elections are a means to end, a means to improve the material conditions of people, right? This is why Cassif travels throughout the country to support workers in factories who he knows would never vote for him, but whose struggle he nevertheless supports. Meretz and the Islamic Party are fig leaf for this government. Cassif says this government, the Bennett government, gives the impression that it's better, more moderate than Netanyahu got because it includes Meretz and the Islamist Ram party. But Cassif says, as a matter of fact, I can give you several examples from the last 2 weeks where this government acted in ways that are far worse than Netanyahu government. But because as the fig leaf of Meretz, Labor, and the Islamic Party, people are not noticing, not criticizing the government. There he is. Being violently subdued by Israeli police during a protest against forced eviction. So definitely, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, this person. One of the examples he gave was regarding an illegal outpost named Aviator, and was built by militant settlers on stolen Palestinian land in northern West Bank. In order to avoid clashes with the settlers, the government allowed them to remain, even though Israeli army recommended they remove. Meretz, Labor, and Islamic Party voted with the government. Meretz, which supposedly carries the banner of the Zionist left, voting to allow an outpost that is considered illegal, even by Israeli standards, is a new, though not surprising, development. Party of yes men and yes women. About 80 to 120 members of the current Knesset are hardcore militant right-wing, Cassif stresses, yet thankfully, because they're split in the issue of Netanyahu, half are pro and half are against him. They will not sit together in unified government. The Likud, which is the prominent party in Israeli politics for decades, is now in the hands of a charismatic leader, namely Benjamin Netanyahu, who has created a party of yes men and yes women, and who obey the leader rather than what is good for the party or the political ideology of the Likud. This is why even Benjamin Zev Begin, the son of the former leader of the Likud and the first right-wing prime minister of Israel, Menahem Begin, found himself out of the party. His family led for almost a century. Our goal is to change the balance of power, and I believe that we will. He then added a sentence from another great Marxist leader and thinker, Antonio Gramsci. I really like this part, actually. With your permission, I want to end with one sentence quoting Gramsci. A socialist should stick to the pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will, and that is what I do. I feel like that is what we should all do, right? We can't completely give up hope. It's good to have a little bit of, pessimism intellectually, as Gramsci and Cassif are pointing out, but, optimism of the will and of the heart, right? Because without that, we don't have a whole lot, right? If we completely lose, hope that things can and will get better. I just thought this was interesting, this Marxist, this communist politician in the Israeli Knesset, the Congress there, and it kind of explaining the reasons why and everything, and being able to change systems within even these very, reactionary systems, it's still important not to cede ground, as Cassif was pointing out, right? Like the video if you like the damn video, subscribe for more content, all part of the people. Quick shout out to the 2 Uber comrades supporting my channel, my partner in Indie Left News. Definitely check out Indie Left News.